I note that one of the prohibited flavors for vaping is cannabis. So I want to ask you, from a harm reduction strategy point of view, why are you treating cannabis and tobacco differently? Vaping is considered a harm reduction strategy to get people off tobacco. Now we're going to make it legal for people to smoke cannabis. I would say we're making it, we're going to promote cannabis use in Canada now with this new legislation. But the cannabis flavor in vaping, which is in fact a less dangerous activity than inhaling combustible marijuana leaves, will be prohibited. So there's an inconsistency, it seems to me, between the treatment of tobacco leaves and marijuana leaves, and I'm wondering why that is.
Well, I think you touched on it. Thank you for the question, first of all. And I do think that you touched on it to a certain extent as you gave the question by recognizing that as we move forward with the legalization of cannabis, just in the same way that products like tobacco and even alcohol are legal does not mean that they are without risks. So cannabis is a product that we are taking steps to legalize, to strictly regulate, and to restrict access to informed adults. But we know that it's a product that has associated risks, and we would not want to do anything to entice people to take up a product like that. So in the same way, the decision was made that on the flavoring of a vaping product, that we wouldn't want to promote the cannabis flavoring, which might then appeal to a young person who might move from the use of a vaping product flavored to cannabis to the use of cannabis itself. Perhaps you can...
in the other direction, off of cannabis onto vaping.
Well, that's an interesting question in the spirit of harm reduction, as you said. That is something that I think we will need to keep an eye on if it were felt. At this point, of course, the introduction of legislation around cannabis becoming a legal product, but a product that we acknowledge has public health risks that need to be understood better. It would be foreseeable down the road if it was felt that again, on the relative risk question, that the relative risks of vaping and using a product that was cannabis flavored somehow offered a public health benefit to be able to take people from a dependence on a cannabis product itself. That would be something that could still be done, I believe, through regulations. Yes, so it wouldn't require the reopening of the legislation. But at this point, in the spirit of caution, we felt that it was best to limit and not to allow that particular flavor promotion.
Thank you. Just on that, Minister, with regard to the vaping helping with regard to tobacco, it is because you have nicotine in the vaping product, which is what smokers are addicted to. They're not addicted to the flavor of the smoke or the other chemicals, it's the nicotine. So in the marijuana area, you might have to add something more than just a flavor to deal with the equivalent transfer in that kind of situation, but it is an interesting concept.
It's not the cannabis smell or flavor that's addictive, it's THC that's addictive. And when I look at the schedule of prohibited ingredients, THC is not, there's only 9, and THC is not one of them. And I was wondering, did you anticipate or think about in advance how this list of prohibited ingredients will harmonize with the legalization? Because I guess THC is currently a prohibited substance in Canada as of this minute, but it's not going to be shortly. But it's not a prohibited ingredient in vaping. So I'm just having difficulty understanding how the strategy works. How your vaping strategy coordinates with your cannabis strategy.
I'm not sure I entirely understand the question. I don't know whether you...
Well, let me phrase it simply then. There's a list of ingredients that, people aren't going to be allowed to vape, including, vitamins and amino acids and caffeine. But it will be legal to vape THC, or be legal for vendors to sell THC-loaded vaping devices. That will be legal.
So if I understand correctly, you're asking about using cannabis products with a vaping device.
Right.
So that would then fall under the legislation around cannabis, if there was cannabis that was associated with a vaping device. Is that?
I'm just wondering how that harmonizes with S5, because it's not other than the cannabis flavor, there's nothing about the ingredients in marijuana that are prohibited in this legislation.
Right, but I think if there were a cannabis ingredient in a vaping product, it would be captured by the cannabis product, or cannabis legislation. Perhaps you can respond to that better, Hilary.
So today, having THC in a vaping product would be illegal because cannabis is illegal. Should cannabis be legalized in the future, it's sort of similar to the question about marijuana flavor, I think. It is possible that it may make sense at that point to consider adding THC to the schedule along with vitamins and caffeine and other things. So that is a potential future action that may need to be taken to harmonize, but I think at this point in time, it's speculative.